To a meeting that is, here we are live. Have you ever gone to a meeting that is unproductive, a waste of your time, or worse, painful? Far too many of us do those kind of meetings, but the truth is you don't have to have those kind of meetings. And today, Gordon Sheppard is going to teach us a new way. So welcome, Gordon.
It's great to be here. Great to be here.
Okay, I'm going to introduce you officially, but before we do that, I'm going to share this over into my Confident Women Leaders community. So for those of you who are not in my Confident Women Leaders community, it is a private Facebook group that I have that is all about women leaders. And so if you're interested in joining that, you will find the link on my page. Okay, let me introduce you to Gordon for a minute. After 25 years in business, Gordon Sheppard has either run or participated in more than 2,000 meetings. Eek, I think I have too, which says a lot, doesn't it? This experience has made him realize that in business, you can't afford another bad meeting. With that inspiration, Gord is now dedicated to helping professionals learn how to run highly effective meetings so they can build stronger teams, grow their organizations, and ultimately serve their customers and their community at their highest level. Amen. Gord is a professional facilitator, trainer, consultant, speaker, author, and host of the Meeting Leadership Podcast, and you should listen to that. I'm going to make sure that I put a link into that before we're done here. He has worked successfully with thousands of professionals from all sectors, including associations, corporations, small business, institutions, nonprofits, and more. He has a master's degree in business admin, bachelor's degree in drama, and is certified in change management. So we are going to talk about some tips today, Gord, about meetings and having them run more effectively. What do you want to say first about meetings?
Well, thanks so much for, reading out the whole bio. I hope people are still awake after that one, but it's really appreciated when folks kind of go for it there. I loved your reaction when I say 2,000 meetings. And I'm so glad, again, I was just at a women's leadership conference in San Diego, 200 plus, folks, professionals in the accounting profession there, and they hear the 2,000 meetings, and some of them go, oh my goodness, and those are the younger ones. The older ones are like, no, and they're like, you can hear it, they're racking it up, 3,000, 4,000, like the agony that folks have been throughout their lifetimes for all the meetings they need to go to, and forget your career, like once you hit post 60 and you're going to go give back to the community, you got to get into a few more. So it doesn't stop. I really appreciated it. And one of the things I always kick these things off with, and I'm just going to ask you this, do me a favor, raise your hand, and anybody that's watching right now can raise their hand if you love meetings. Like, put it way up there.
Okay, I like some meetings, not all meetings. I'll do the halfway.
I love the half hands, and I love those kind of things. Now, here's this one. Raise your other hand if you've fallen asleep in a meeting. Oh, there you go. Don't name names. What type of meeting was it?
It wasn't one that I was running necessarily.
Oh, but there you go. Yeah, that'd be bad if you were running one and you fell asleep. I always love asking that one because, again, more hands go up for falling asleep than they do. Somehow we are all complicit in putting up with bad meetings so often, and I'm just out there to bust that up and really kind of make a big difference. And, it's funny, I asked, you if you love meetings, and I always take this moment then to say, hey, you know what, if I'm going to be the guy that is going to be the meeting guy in a sense, I want to tell people why I love meetings, and they're honest reasons. And the first one is this one.
Before you go there, I just want to say, for those of you watching, if you have comments, please put them in the comment box. Gord is going to answer questions, and we're going to do that as well. And if you just want to comment on something, I'll read the comments out periodically. Because I'm recording with a program called Ecamm Live, it's not going to show me your name. So if you want me to include your name so I can know who's making the comment, just include your name. So, yes, Gord, go.
Well, for sure, and it's funny because I think the Ecamm Live will detect their tears as they sort of, cry about all the wasted time they've had in those meetings. There's just, the reasons that I love meetings are pretty significant because I think that meetings are the building blocks of great organizations. That's where I start. I'm like, if we can make sure that you got a great meeting, you build a great organization. If you can have a great organization, you can serve your end user, your customer, your community at the highest level. And I know right now, in the conversation that we're having, the people that we're reaching, they're going to pick up a tip or something, and they're going to go back and they're going to make their next meeting a little bit better, and that's going to have a direct impact, correlation to the people that they serve. So I get really excited about that.
Me too.
The second reason that I always tell people is if we're going to tackle the biggest issues of our time, I mean climate change, healthcare, the economy, right? If we want to get at them, we need to meet significantly better.
Yeah.
The poor example for my kids that comes out from those parliaments and on the news and we see our most senior leaders conducting these meetings that are poor. They don't get through as much as they need to get to. They're running large organizations, governments, large corporations. So if we want to really do that, and the thing that's exciting for me for the work that you do is I know that some of the women that are listening right now are dealing with some of the biggest issues of our time. So isn't that exciting that today they'll pick up something, an attitude shift, something that they'll take back and start to tackle that? That's pretty cool. And the third reason,
I think
go ahead.
Well, I think that's what I love about my ladies is they are passionate about the work they do. And so, if you're going to give them some tips to actually get to the work instead of the BS that happens at meetings, all the better.
And thank you for BS, and let's let those those colorful words fly, because I think that's what's going on underneath our good Canadian veneer, right? We're in these tolerance moments where we're putting up with things. It's just not right. And it brings me to the third reason, and I'm thinking about the people that are watching again right now. It's people like you, people who have been there, done that. I have been in a lousy nonprofit meeting. I have been in a deathly weekly staff updates corporate meeting, right?
Oh yeah,
right?
I ran them.
I'm like, oh my God, like you're lucky. I mean, I bet yours were perfect and that's great. But I'm telling you, those ones are the ones that are just a disaster because people are not conscious. They're sort of punching it in and so much time is being lost. And again, when I can put myself in those shoes and remember those days, because now I'm out helping people and sort of, I get to be that voice in the room that says real things. I wish we'd had a Facebook Live like this, a training, something, just to turn it around. And I don't mean like a full program. And I know there are programs that go multi-year. Mine, I'm looking for 6 to 8 hours for someone who's gone through like a title change. You know what I mean? They've gone from employee to manager. They've gone from manager to director. They've gone from director to whatever.
Because we're not taught these skills.
Right. And so how do we make sure that they're taught? And I can tell you, I've been in front of engineers, bureaucrats, lawyers, doctors, guys that could take my heart apart. Yeah. And they're struggling with these very basics. And the big thing that's a killer is they don't get taught these simple skills in school. And then they get into work environments and they wonder why profits are down. They wonder why things aren't going as well as they could be. So if we could do that, and when we take one action, again, the people like yourself or whoever it is listening today, watching, they're going to take an action. And when they do that, it'll be like dropping a pebble in the pond. The ripple effect, it'll be felt throughout their own internal attitude. Yes. It'll be felt throughout their team, throughout their organization. It'll impact their community and their clients. And I really do believe this. And I'm going to say this with a straight face, and I'll back this up in about a half an hour. I really do think that we can change the world one meeting at a time. Yes. And I say that moment, and I can hear the people on the other side of the camera like, not possible. Give me the half hour, stick around, let's dig into this and actually sort of, again, you can look at the hopeful part of it. It is possible. And I'm going to say your 6 to 8 hours of thinking and getting into it away. And it's not that you can't do deep work. That's fine. But something where you can take some of these things and go forward. And I get really excited, especially about the truth about meetings. I just love this topic.
So we've got 7 truths and you're going to unpack them. So what's the first one?
Well, the first one is that we aren't actually measuring the cost of our meetings. That's truth number one, right? Yeah. Do you have a favorite hockey team?
No, but, sure, pick Oilers.
Oilers for fun? Yeah. I love using the professional sports team analogy because the average NHL hockey team spends about $60 million a year on their players. Yeah. Now, if they work 2,000 hours a year like you and me, there's a good chance that 1 hour meeting with those guys is $30,000, right? Imagine not making the playoffs, you shining up your golf clubs in that last hour and you're gone and whatever. Here's the thing. This meeting that you and I are having right now is probably worth $1,000. Yep. The people that are on this call, if we added it all up for the, again, the folks at their level, it's a few $1,000s easy, right? For what people that are. As soon as you start to get into that mindset, I can tell you there's a third of the people in the room that will resonate with that, right? So what do? There's a simple formula, right? We want to add up the hourly wages, right? The all-in wages, right? Not just sort of the, like your pay and your benefits. Put that all into an hourly wage. And you can do this very quickly in your head. Like you're at a meeting with 10 people, you start just name them along the way, right? And so you've got that. You got to turn on the lights, right? Get the electricity, whatever. And someone brings some muffins and the coffee. Put that in, get an hourly rate. Yeah. Now you've got this hourly rate and and you can say, well, we just spent $1,000 on that meeting. And by the way, in nonprofit settings especially, they're like, no, it's $250. I'm like, no, it's always $1,000. It's always because of
and you add travel that adds up a tremendous amount of time.
So just for a second, like go to your next meeting and be honest about the actual cost of the meeting. Get to the end of the meeting and say, was that worth it? Yeah.
Yep.
Or
prior. Is it worth it to have a meeting that's going to cost us $1,000?
And what did we get for it? What is what I call our MROI? What is our meeting return on investment?
Yeah.
And what can we do with that investment? And if we got something for it, which we often do in meetings, of course, we come up with our best products, our best services, do more of that and invest in that.
Yeah.
But when you're burning time that it's taking you away from those other things, because once you get that hourly thing in there, then you do the annual.
Yeah.
So take that weekly staff updates meeting that we're talking about, right? So there's your $1,000 a week times 50 weeks a year. There's your 50 grand.
Yeah.
And I know that you deal a lot in the nonprofit space. 50 grand's a big deal. Doesn't matter what the size of the place is. So if you can go in there and start to say, well, can we cut one of those meetings? Maybe just one. Can we do something about it?
Or some people not attend.
Or some people not something, right?
Yeah.
Where we start to, but it activates the dialogue from the cost side. And then the biggest thing, of course, is opportunity cost, right? You could be in that meeting or you could be doing something of higher value for the organization. Because those ones that are the worst is when you're in the meeting and you're not there.
Yep.
So I love starting at that cost moment as a really significant truth.
Okay.
Do the hourly thing. And then what's one of my favorite big examples, we talked about sort of smaller ones, is if you look at something like Alberta Healthcare. 100,000 employees, $22 billion budget. On my bad MBA math, pretty quickly, they're easily spending $500 million to $1 billion a year just on meetings. Okay.
Oh, that hurts my heart.
Right? Isn't that crazy? Those are tax dollars, right?
Yeah,
so here's the thing. Are all those meetings efficient?
No.
Not a chance, right?
No.
And so that the wild thing is I'm just aching when I start to hit the senior leaders and I'm like, wait a second, what if, in that case, you eliminated 5% of the worst meetings?
Yeah.
And you said, we want to have a culture of meeting excellence. Suddenly you've got, again, we can argue the math, $25 million worth of people and their time to do something else.
Yeah, yeah.
I always would advocate in those areas, before the bodies start flying in education, healthcare, whatever, why not just go after this low-hanging fruit? And start to move things around in this way with this thinking, and that's a bandwagon that I've certainly been on for a long time. So I can talk all day long about this cost thing. It's it's really important.
And I think
someone picks it up.
Yeah, and I think you've convinced us because it's incredibly important. And you're right, in our nonprofits and our small businesses and municipal positions and stuff, it's nuts what we're wasting. So what's the second truth?
The second truth, I always like to start this one off. Have you ever walked out of a meeting and said, hey, that meeting should have been an email?
Often.
Right? It's because we don't know why we're meeting.
Yeah.
And if I have sort of an original contribution in this space, and we'll talk a little bit about agendas and facilitation, this kind of thing, and those are standard kind of table stakes in any meeting.
Yeah.
The piece that I'm excited about, super thrilled about, is I believe that you should be able to stop any meeting at any moment and connect that moment directly to your strategy. I believe this so strongly, I always say it twice.
Yeah.
I believe that you should be able to stop any meeting at any moment and connect that moment directly to your strategy. Now, at this moment in every talk, in every room that I'm in, and I'll just ask you, and you can play along and just see how you do, but do you know the vision statement for any organization that you've either worked with or one that you're in or your own?
One I do.
Go ahead, say it.
Okay, so I'm a Toastmaster, and our mission statement is about facilitating leadership and personal development in individuals so they can serve back in their communities.
Immediately, you know why you're there.
Yeah.
Toastmasters is really good at structuring their meetings in a way where they repeat these things over and over and over again, right? So we can learn from the best practices of Toastmasters and go, wow, why don't we pull that best practice into our meeting? So my challenge to the leaders that are on this one right now is this. Get your vision statement out and say it at the beginning of your next meeting. Yeah. Have your meeting. Yeah. Leave 10 minutes at the end and go, is the meeting that we just had, did it move our vision statement forward?
Yeah.
And if you just spent an hour talking about the gluten-free hot dog issue for the summer celebration, I'm so glad you're laughing, but the pain for me is I was in that meeting. It didn't do it, right? So
mine was we had locked we had a lady who was menopausal, and we had locked the thermostat, and she kept breaking into the thermostat. So we had more conversations about temperature of the office than I ever care to admit.
Right? Can you imagine, in terms of what you could have been doing versus what you did do? And again, we kind of get into this thing. It's really, really important to do this. And any aspect of that strategic plan. So you mentioned the mission statement. I really like the goal. We call them goals or objectives. I don't care what the name is. If your goal is to increase in nonprofit association, it's increase membership. serve client by a percentage better, whatever those things are.
Right.
The nice thing is when you start to bring the meeting strategy language alive in every meeting that you're in, you've got a chance then, because what happens is when they've got those 3-year strat plans, those whatever, they lose touch with them. They sit on the
they're
shelf.
a binder on the shelf. That's it.
That's it. And so, but if you bring it into language and say, wait a second, at the beginning of this meeting, we're going to talk about, let's say it's raised number of association members. Let's just say it's that for one. So we want to do, and so you're in your weekly updates meeting in March. But the strat plan was put out in January 1st. In March, those people in that meeting, if they were actually thinking in this way, they can say, wait a second, we're off target.
Yeah.
We either could do more or we could do less. And then that feedback loop starts to get created, and we're creating a culture of excellence so that the senior leader then can get some honest feedback right from the ground and immediately know if those things are on target or not. And this becomes really exciting because now the language is rolling off the tongues of the people. The objectives are very, very clear, and they know why they are in every meeting that they're in. It's really, really important.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight what you've said a couple times, Gord. And most of us in this community, most of the women that I work with, happen to be high achievers, overachievers, type A personalities. And so you've said it again and again, a culture of excellence, of meeting excellence. And I think that's so critical mindset shift to start thinking about how do we make our meetings excellent? Not just good or good enough or tick off the box because we're going through an accredited process and we have to have this meeting. But how do we excel at having meetings and create a culture that's drives that? That's critically important, I think.
I'm so glad that you're picking up on that. And again, if we can focus on this unit, to me, it's the unit that's most you can do most about quickly. And there are other self-awareness is really important. Leadership is important. Process is important. There's all those things that go into an org that are important, but they all intersect in a meeting.
Yeah.
And so if the meetings are running smoothly, there's a good chance it's going to have an influence on that. And that's the place where we're communicating anyway. So I just love this strategy piece. The other piece that people often have in their strategies is values. So if you're having problems in your meeting, you take the strat plan out and you type up the agenda and you go, hey, one of our values is respect.
Yeah.
You have your meeting. When there's disrespect in the meeting, you stop the meeting and go, we're all about respect.
Yeah.
It's right there in our strat plan.
Yeah.
And that way we have an anchor, and if hopefully the strat plan is in good shape. Sometimes it's not, but it gives you an incentive to pull that together.
Yes.
And you'll always know why you're in every meeting you're in going forward. I think it's an exciting possibility.
Well, and I think what it's doing also, Gord, is connecting the strat plan to the meeting, to the performance appraisal, to the work that we're doing with the client. I think often in organizations, these are isolated pieces and there's no connection. And so the meeting is a great place to provide that connection between all the moving parts.
Well, and it is possible. Like meetings get this sort of comedic knockdown right now, and it's not hard to pick on a meeting and meetings, bloody meetings, and John Cleese, and yes, that's fine. Yeah. Except this is serious business, and I can tell you, there's every talk I give, there's 2, 3, and 4 people lined up afterwards, and some of them are feeling so helpless.
Yeah.
And they're just getting by, or the leaders don't want to put in the time, and yet they're wondering why people won't follow them. This communication portion is such an opportunity.
I just had a thought, Gord. Some of the women here are the ones running the meetings, but some of the ones are the ones attending the meetings. So as we're talking, can you kind of keep that in mind? Like, if I'm not the one running the meeting, how do I influence how that meeting is going?
I get to ask this all the time. I was from all age ranges. I hear this kind of thing when I'm teaching. So simple things are, hey, I was watching this Facebook Live thing, and maybe you should catch it. I can't say enough about the thing. Or, hey, there's a meeting leadership podcast, and there's this thing on agendas. It's 5-part series. It's only going to take you about 25 minutes to get through.
And it's free.
And check it out. So I think there's those things where you can kind of be subtle.
Right.
Sometimes the meeting leaders are there's no humility, and then I always just start doing yoga because you don't have a chance. And there's a lot of people that are in that mode. But if there's a little sliver of humility, and again, you'll hear me today give out probably half a dozen anchor points to say, okay, so does your boss resonate with money? Do they resonate with people and retention? Do they resonate? What do they resonate with? And then maybe those things will inspire them to start to make some changes. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the third truth.
Well, here's the thing. If you look anywhere across nonprofits, any downtown set of office towers, this kind of thing, the truth is that we're burning out our best people by sending them to too many daytime meetings. Can I get a hallelujah for that one?
Yeah.
You're nodding, right? So I do this.
I got some thumbs up too.
I'll do this with you right now. So you've been in a work world and you're in your own world now. When you're in the work world, how many meetings? Oh, sorry. Here's how it goes. Raise your hand if you were in at least one meeting per week at that time. Thanks. Now keep your hand up if you're in at least two. Stay there. Keep it up for three. Now count with me. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Keep it up. 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Really? Are you like 30?
Oh, yeah. I mean, between one-to-one meetings and team meetings, absolutely I was in that.
And so what was happening during that time? And I don't even know you well, because here's the thing. At nighttime, you were doing your work.
Yes, you were. Bingo,
right?
Sunday afternoons. When
and
I should have been with my family.
37.5 FTE is what you signed up for. And they didn't put it in the job description that you're supposed to be going to. And I love that thing of like, oh, yeah, that is a meeting. That one-on-one is a meeting. When they drop by my office, that's a meeting. Of course it is. And when you add it up in that way, and the looks on people's faces, and I've met guys and gals, especially in some of the bigger industries where their faces, you do this little exercise and they don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And then there's someone in the room. I was in a room with 230 people in the room recently. Yeah. And someone's got 20. They got that hand up at 25, and I'm like, that's not funny.
No.
It's not. And it's not haha anymore, because we know that their relationships are being affected, and we know they need to do something about it. And you were saying, what can we do about it if you're either the leader or the follower in this given situation? As the follower, when you're getting bounced around these things, one of the quick things that I'll say is if you can get in touch with the facilitator and ask, if you've only got 10 minutes out of a 2-hour meeting you can call to, ask them to make you the first thing on the agenda. Hey, can I just do the first 10? I'll do my thing and go. Yeah. If people are reasonable, they'll start to deal with that. And they'll go, you shouldn't be here for 2 hours. That makes sense. That's one thing you kind of immediately do. The other thing is you do this inventory with your boss. I had someone who bought my book, project manager, and they bought the book. They got bold. They went to their boss, said, hey, why do we need to do a weekly staff updates meeting for an hour every week? And the boss said, well, we've always done it that way. And he said, can we do it every 2 weeks instead? And they did that. Then what happened was the boss did it with all of her direct reports and got a full day a month back into her schedule.
Wow.
What did I just
crazy.
say? Something so simple, and yet what would you do as a senior manager with an extra day a month? How much more would you get done? And if I just said a day, who knows how much more you can get out of that kind of thing with those very simple tweaks. I think that's really important. And I think if you're the meeting leader, you need to then hear this message. And if you believe it and you want to keep your best people, you go immediately, you cut one of their meetings. You just give them some hope. Find a meeting and say, that one's dumb. Get out of here. And give them the mindset shift, the attitude to know that they can do that, and then actually do that honest review of what's going on and be honest about their, if they're doing 60 hours a week, which is not sustainable, then change that. And that's the piece that they need to get after, and that leads to sort of better things. And again, this culture of, can you imagine being a recruiter for any of these organizations and saying, we have the best meetings in the business? Can you imagine, like, people they're suspicious at first, and you go, no. We put the work in, and this is a big part of working here, because we know what that 70,000, whatever, 80,000, there's a number where it levels off for dollars. And this is one of the things that is a key retention thing, and I think, again, it's very low-hanging fruit.
Without a doubt. Okay, reminder for those of you listening, either now or on the replay, if you have questions, pop them in. Gord will answer them. We'll make sure that we have time for them before we're done. And if you're watching the replay, Gord will come back and answer the questions as well. So we are moving on to truth number 4, Gordon.
Yeah, here's the thing. I always say having a title doesn't mean you know how to run a meeting.
No, it does not.
Hey, think about those fancy titles you've had, in your I had one. I was the manager of creative services and marketing. I was in the TV business. It was years ago. And so I was an employee. I died to be a manager. I used to, until I became a manager, it was just like I look back on that experience now, and I can tell you we had a weekly staff updates meeting, right? I didn't like it the way it was run before, but now I was the manager, and I can tell you the first day I walked in, right? I walked in there like this, and I was like, I ran what used to be like a 90-minute meeting. I ran it in 9 minutes, and I walked in there and I went boom, and I turned around, I walked out the door, patted myself on the back, and went back to my office. How many months of those employees' trust did I lose from that one action? 6
gone.
Months, easy. I didn't know what to do. I was drunk on the title. And that is just, please learn from me.
Yeah.
Please learn how to run a meeting. Please learn how to meet your team where they are at versus where you think they should be, and those types of things. And those are just very simple things to do. And I hope people are able to sort of do this. And one of the first steps that we need to do to solve this, of course, is get some level of self-awareness, right? So there's a simple thing that I do. It's a simple exercise, and I'll do it with you right now. I think what I'm going to say is you're going to be A and I'm going to be B.
Okay.
And we're going to go through 3 simple questions, and you're going to ask me this question, but I'm going to show you how I'm going to answer it. And it's really to just very quickly demonstrate this tech. So the first question is, how do you act during a meeting? And if you ask me that question, how do you act during a meeting?
Hey, Gord, how do you act during a meeting?
My voice gets really loud. Say it again.
How do you act during a meeting, Gord?
I use my hands a lot. It's really, go ahead.
How do you act during a meeting, Gord?
I get really amped up. You can hear me answering one thing at a time.
Yeah.
That's the difference for helping the person who's answering, not to just say a monologue and blah, 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 say things they don't hear.
Yeah.
So they say, how do you act during a meeting? These one answers come back, right? And then you switch. B does it, says, how do you act during a meeting? And A answers. Yeah. The second question is, how do you want to act during a meeting?
Okay, how do you want to act, Gordon, during a meeting?
Same cadence, and we do that sort of thing. And we go back, and then B asks, and then the final question is, how are you going to get there? And then again, we do this cadence. So this can happen in 15 minutes with any meeting team. You can hear what I just demonstrated. It's very simple. And then once you do that, you just sit down in quiet and just take notes.
So I love that exercise. I was talking to a client the other day, and she's afraid to share leadership at meetings. But I think what you just said would be a really great way to say, you know what, I'm not comfortable running the meetings all the time. I know that I'm not the best person. I'd love to share leadership. And for her, there's some control issues, right? Like, I'm afraid to give up control.
For sure.
But again, coming back to your podcast, some of your resources, like, as a team, let's go through some of this stuff together. If we invested, think of it this way, if we invested 2 or 3 or 5 hours of going through Gord's information as a team, learning how to more effectively run our meetings, that's how you generate that culture of excellence.
And if you've got the time to invest internally, I'm like, go for it. That's a great thing. If you want to bring me in, I've been all over. I've been across Canada. I'm down in the States now. I do a half-day workshop. It's exciting because it's one of those moments in time where I'm in there and I can really get things to move sort of faster. And then my work actually leads to strategic planning and consulting because I say we have to connect so then if you really want that full meal deal of the before, during, and after, and I, as a facilitator, I've been in happy rooms, innovative rooms, I've been in hot rooms, and so there's that difference. And so I'm just saying, where is your organization at when you go to pick? And if you've got that time to go through the material that's already there, go for it. And I think that's a really great thing. What strikes me about trainings these days is, and this is just my flavor, some of them, even some of the ones I'm trained in, take too long. And so organizations don't set aside the right amount of time to invest in people time to get it done. So again, my thing is like, what can you do in the next meeting that's one simple thing that gets you a little bit of feeling of traction to then move forward? And then there's all kinds of complicated programs that you can do, but so often it's around implementation, and it's not really a lack of knowledge that people have. It's really, it's just, again, can I go forward and do this? And so the self-awareness piece for these people with the titles is really, really important. And it leads me to saying the other piece is that I believe that you can choose how you act during a meeting. And it doesn't matter if you're the leader or the follower. And I say that to both. You cross your arms, sit in the back, you hold back, that kind. You can do that. Leader, don't do the agenda, keep getting the same bad results, or you can be the proactive leader. And it leads me to a story that I love recounting as often as possible. Are you familiar with the story of Viktor Frankl?
Yeah, very much so.
Go ahead. You tell your version. Go ahead.
Okay, so Viktor Frankl is a psychologist. He's got all these titles. But he lived in a concentration camp, and it was his mindset that got him through. And what I love about the Viktor Frankl story is that he chose to see his circumstances as positive. And he chose to communicate that and share that, inspiring that message with those around him.
There's a great book called Man's Search for Meaning.
Read it.
At a recent conference, I said, does anybody know this book? And I say it's a bucket list book. You should read it once in your life. This one lady put her hand up. She said, I read it every year.
Yeah.
And I'll just continue because you've got this whole spirit of it. And the piece that I like to pull out of the story is this. He goes into those concentration camps. 1 in 28 people make it out alive when he's there. People around him being beaten, starved, tortured, murdered when he's there. And he finds out that in between stimulus and response, in between people around him being beaten, starved, tortured, murdered, and his response, there's a gap.
Yeah.
And in that gap is the power to choose your response.
Which is all what I teach in my book.
You can choose your response. You can choose your freedom. And I'm glad to hear you're talking about your book and that spirit of it's a choice. A bad meeting is not inevitable. It really is a choice. And it's your choice at your next meeting, not like letting it all go downhill. It really is getting that in. So for these people with these titles, those little bits of self-awareness that I talk about, and I love the Myers-Briggs and the true colors and the disc in the right hands. And yes, the deep work is fine. But I'm looking again, you can hear it's quick. Let's move forward. Let's get some self-awareness and start to get some energy into those things and move them forward. And then we get, of course, into techniques around simple facilitation techniques. So the one that I can pass along quite quickly around being fair as a facilitator for these people that are leading meetings is just this idea of the parking lot. Right? So just put the words parking lot somewhere on board, on the agenda, and when that talker in the meeting is talking too much, it's a very gentle, hey, that's a great thing that you're talking about. Let's put that idea in the parking lot. It's not for our meeting right now. And I say it because half the people on this call know it, but half of them I can tell you don't. And I've seen super senior leaders like CEOs go, oh, that's all I needed from this 4 hours we just spent together. And that's the thing that gets them to move forward. The other one for me is put up on the board, it's ground rules. For the first minute of your next meeting. Ground rules goes on the agenda or it goes up there and probably both. Favorite question is like, what do you want to do with cell phones? And that starts an easy conversation and you can hear the attitudes in the room. I don't care in the end what they do. I want to hear them say out loud what they're going to do.
These are the rules. And we all agree.
These are the rules. This is how we act, right? That's the thing. And the other ones I put in, I'll say, what do you want to do if there's a fight? And I'll say very quickly, one person speaks, it's about the issue and not about the person. And those are three simple ground rules that we kind of get. But if we write them down and we all say them out loud, then when that passionate disagreement comes up during the meeting, you've got a chance to know how we act together. And that's a really, really important piece for anybody, of course, leading any meeting. And if we were here again for 4 hours straight, I would take you through another, all kinds of things. You can hear from my work, it's just trying to find that simple thing that resonates. And again, as I'm hearing your filter on it, oh, that's what I do in my book. That's the thing I think people need to feel ownership over. I took it, I made it my own. It's like those vision statements. A lot of them are not well written, but it doesn't mean that you ignore them. You take them and put them in your own words, and your own words are usually like, I need to pay the mortgage and my car payments. Like that's your vision. That's what it is. So make that kind of come into the room.
We're going to go on to the next truth, but before we do that, there's a comment from Tina. Thank you, Tina. I love that you're here watching. Here's another great resource I learned about and used in my Masters of Arts in Leadership for Meeting to optimize bringing people in the room together. This is backed by social science, free and online, and there's even a cheat sheet on which facilitation method would work for your specific goals. It's called Liberating Structures. You can combine them for maximizing meetings. She's got the book, but she's put the link in. So awesome. Thank you, Tina, for sharing that link. I know that you are in a number of meetings. And I know that the program you took also taught you a few things. So thank you for sharing. Okay, Gordon.
Thank you so much. I can't get enough of having sort of created a community literally from around the world. That where we're starting to hear best practices. And again, I love learning about new resources. And, for me, so much of it is like, if it's not my thing that you take on to, do that one. Do something. The need is endless for tackling this topic.
Well, and a lot of it's common sense, but not common practice.
Totally.
Okay, we are on to the fifth truth. It's okay
to be late for a meeting?
Really?
Tina? What do you think, Tina?
Is it okay?
Right now? Oh my God!
I hate being late for a meeting, and I hate when other people are late for a meeting. So you better convince me, Gord.
Well, the thing I don't. If I had the magic bullet for this, I'd be a multi-billionaire. But I don't have the one. But I will share a story from a podcast that I did with a guy, and he was a senior leader running a $500 million portfolio in education. And when he was retired, he could tell this story. He couldn't tell it when he was there. But he said that one time, so he would lock the door. When the meeting started. And all the nonprofit, all the nonprofit people are like, oh no, I can't lock the door. And I'm like, oh no, you can't go for 5 years. And I mean, it's just madness what's going on. So he would lock the door. He had a great story. He said one time, 9 o'clock in the morning, locks the door. And guess who's late? His boss, right? The boss is pounding on the door to let me in. Did Larry let him in?
No?
No.
Really?
How many times did that happen?
Once.
One time.
Yeah.
Did Larry get in trouble? He sure did. But
I bet he did.
right? Guess what happened after that? His boss started doing the same
And
thing.
everybody else showed up on time.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
Get on top of that as quickly as you can. I say that to give people some hope. And there are reasonable reasons to be late for meetings. Now, you don't do it like without forewarning. You're like, hey, guys, we're going to go to the closed door policy. And if you're late, you're late. And if you're late for the wrong reason, you work that out. And it's not that you crush your team with it. Mm-hmm. It's just there's no time for it anymore. And by the way, I would say in your nonprofit and in your volunteering, I had a story. I was brought in as a consultant to do strategic planning with a nonprofit board.
Yeah.
And there's 8 of us in the room, and we're waiting for the board chair. Guy's actually a nice guy, but he's 15 minutes late. And he comes in, he's talking about like something that nobody cares about. Good consultant, what do? You shut up. You say, oh, would you like to start? And you collect your money. My instinct that day, I don't know, I stood up. I looked at this nice man, and I said, hey, you're 15 minutes late.
Yeah.
This meeting is probably worth $2,000 if we add up the real dollars for these volunteers. Yeah. What do you want to do about it?
I bet you couldn't hear a pin drop in that room.
And then I went to go reach for my briefcase because I thought, well, this is over and I'm done.
Yeah.
And I tell this story for this next moment. The guy to his right, the person that they had fought hard to get on to manage the money. Yeah. Anybody in nonprofit heard that one before?
Yeah.
He went like this. He goes, oh, thank goodness somebody said something.
Wow.
That's a real story.
Yeah.
And I tell it as often as I can because that's right below what we're thinking. So why can't we say it? So that the next time we actually educate that nice guy who's got good intentions. He was fine. He wasn't a bad guy at all.
No.
He's just late and tardy. But in this case, it was really slowing all these people down. Now, what's happening in nonprofit volunteering? Attrition.
Oh,
and the good Canadians, it's just like, see you later. Gotta go. Got something else to do.
And they don't say anything. Yeah.
There are all kinds of professionals that are showing up for one meeting only across nonprofits. 26,000 nonprofits in Alberta.
Yeah.
They're showing up. They get to the meeting. It's poorly run.
Yeah.
And they're not used to it. And then they leave. And we lose their capacity. And we just, nonprofit is $7 billion, arguably a $7 billion impact in this province alone, Canada, whatever. It's not haha funny and it's not, oh gosh, whatever anymore. It's like if you run a great meeting, you'll get more done for the end user that you want to really impact.
I want to highlight too, I think when we talk about meetings, I think we're often thinking about us in our work situation. But I had daughters in dance and boys in Taekwondo and school meetings. And, I was running some of those meetings or I was a participant. But, oh my God, those were some of the most painful meetings. You put a bunch of mothers in a room. Right. And there's like,
but what would have happened if you just put the ground rules up at the beginning, in the first minute?
Yeah.
What are the ground rules for this meeting?
Yeah.
Hey, do you want to socialize after the meeting? Great. And just rip that off. And because, again, in our volunteering, we don't have time. Yeah. There's no, and I'm not patient for it anymore. I used to be, and there's no time because you just want to get more done. And the people that are really there for the right reasons, they want to get more done too.
And we want the quality of life, right? I mean, meetings are sucking our lives out of us, whether it's work or volunteer. And so if you want the quality of life, I think you're right. One of the things that I talk about, Gord, all the time is the courage to do things. And I think that's what you're talking about. I love that you're saying rip the Band-Aid off. That takes courage for someone to do that. And I know as women, many of us lack the courage. We lack that ability to have that assertiveness. And so, work with it inside of you. Those of you who work with me know that I'm talking about this all the time. It's what Gord was talking about earlier. It's the thoughts in the middle. It's disrespectful for me to do that. I don't have the ability to stand up to my boss. I'm not good at confrontation. No one's going to agree with me. All of those thoughts in your head are what get in the way of you having the courage to stand up and say that. And so until you deal with those thoughts, you're not going to do it. So it comes back to that mindset where you think you can't impact anything, but you can. You just have to have the courage to do it.
I think that's so important. And I think, again, if people can just not even so much in what we're saying, just catch the tone of what we're saying right now and really gather off of that. And then again, do one thing. Do one thing. And then maybe see if you can add that up, and in a week, maybe you can do a few things, and just see if you can get some traction into these things. Yeah, for sure.
All right. What's the last truth, Gord?
Well, I think the one that's there, if I could draw my bad unicorn, it's the idea that great meetings are rare.
Yeah.
Right? But they're so rare and they're super memorable when they occur, that when they occur, can you have the presence of mind to stop and record the conditions that just occurred?
Yeah. Yeah. What
Just
made
simply.
it happen?
Who was the facilitator? What was on the agenda, right? What was the thing that sort of made that occur? And then that needs to be retained in what I'm going to call a shared document. So many of these agendas and minutes from our meetings are sitting on somebody's laptop. So can you get them at least into the cloud somewhere, into a Google Doc or something?
Yeah.
And then that becomes where we actually record how all these sort of best practices going forward. So if you're with the Ring Ed Association, or if you're in your company, it doesn't matter. Wherever that shared document is, we're creating a memory around our regular meetings, and we're allowing that to kind of go forward. And the piece that it really leads into for me as sort of the closing part of getting towards the end of our talk is I would say if it was our pay that was getting it done, then I wouldn't be here. I'd have nothing to do.
Right, right.
But the reality is it's not our pay, right? And inspiration eats paychecks for lunch. So I always like to go out and say, here's something else that's happening in your meetings, and this is for other people that are thinking maybe in a different brain way about the people in their meetings. When you're getting down about someone being late and the agenda and the whatever, I always like to say, what inspires you? And that's another one of these questions that you can work on with your team. And I tell a couple stories with just sort of and let the joy into them, not just information, and say, you know what, Terry Fox, 1980, right?
Yeah.
This young man, he loses a leg to cancer.
Yeah.
He sets out to run a marathon a day until he can run across Canada. Terry Fox did that 143 times until he got about halfway, and he had to stop. Yeah. And I don't know, have you ever been to that memorial on the North Shore Lake Superior in Thunder Bay?
No.
If you ever that's bucket list. If you ever get a chance, you stand there and you'd imagine what he achieved. Since he did that run, more than $700 million has been raised for cancer research around the world. I mean, this is just a larger-than-life story. So I say that for the folks to say, maybe yours is larger than life. Yeah. Maybe it's your kids. Or maybe it's like the next story I'm about to share with you as well. I was in regular meetings in that corporation I worked in. There was a quiet lady. I didn't know much about her. Now, thankfully, one year at a Christmas party, I had a chance to speak with her. Yeah. And I learned that on her administrator salary, she sent more than half of it back to another country. She built a home for her parents and sent many of her relatives through post-secondary education. Yeah. And when I tell that story, those people are in your meetings too. So on those days when it's rough, when it's, I don't know, the volunteer one's going wrong or your work one's going wrong, all those people in those rooms have their own motivation. They have their own inspiration. So if it's not our paychecks, they're going to get it done. If it's not the cost thing you globbed onto, maybe it'll be the inspiration thing. And again, take 5-10 minutes at the beginning of your next meeting and say, stop for a second. You know what? I saw this guy, he's telling me this thing on his Facebook Live thing. What inspires you? And just go around and be honest about that and start to connect with each other and create those relationships that allow your fabric, your meeting thing to start. Because when we do that, like I said at the beginning, it's like dropping that pebble in the pond. Yeah. The ripple effect will be felt throughout all the things that you're doing. And when we do this, it doesn't matter which meeting that you're in, I really do believe that together we can change the world one meeting at a time.
I totally agree. I love what you're talking about, Gord, because I've been doing some research lately, and those of you who follow along know that I'm working on my second book. And part of the journey is looking at my journey. And I was, excelled as a leader until I didn't. And so I'm trying to figure out why I did this drop, right? Why suddenly people were saying I lacked integrity when for years and years I was, doing so great. And it was coming back out that I learned about relationship building. And one of the things that we did, and I realized started to really make that shift to come back out, was we started meetings with what's called bucket filling. You've probably read the book, How Full Is Your Bucket, right?
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And so it was just bucket filling, Thanks for helping me out for doing that. Oh my God, I want to tell you a story about one of my clients and how they succeeded. We spent the first 10 minutes raising the energy in the room, raising the positivity in the room. And that turned around those meetings. It turned around the toxic culture that had somehow developed. And it was meetings that made the shift for us. So
I love what you're, one of the worst things that we can hear, and bless Robert's rules, except that they're about 100 years too late these days.
Yes.
One of the worst things that can happen is the first moment of the meeting, because can I please have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting, and then no one's read them. You just said you start the meeting with filling the bucket.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how a meeting starts. I can't say enough about it. It's not that you don't approve the minutes, but you do that like last because no one cares.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the order that we're doing things in. And I come in, I challenge those things, and people are like, oh, that's crazy. It's not crazy.
No.
Get the energy moving, get people into what they're doing. And I just thanks for sharing that. I won't forget that one. That's a good one.
All right, we do have a couple people online. If you have questions, pop them in before we finish up. For those of you who are following along on the replay, again, ask questions as well. Gord will answer them. I've also put in the comments section a couple of links from Gord's podcast. And if you go to that podcast page and scroll down to the bottom, there's some downloads that are really helpful for you. I really encourage that. Subscribe to Gord's podcast. Please, please, please add your podcast. I talk about podcasts all the time, and I'm not sure enough women leaders realize how valuable podcasts are and how you can intermix that with when you're cooking breakfast, when you're making supper, when you're driving to the next meeting. Those kinds of things can help infiltrate your brain and help develop your skills kind of on the side. It's not like you have to go take a course to do this all the time. Podcasts are amazing. So
yeah, totally. I'll just jump in with a few details. It's called the Meeting Leadership Podcast. Yep. So if you pump that into any one of your major podcast apps, you've been on the show. It's been great to have you there, and we've learned, your inspiration. Some of the things that inspire you. We've learned some of your techniques for helping people. Again, I just can't get enough of probably, we're 132 episodes in.
I know.
The guests that are coming on are such a range of people. And again, if you want to go get whatever basic meeting skills around agendas and facilitation, this kind of thing, it's there. But also these higher level, how does Disney create great leaders? We've got Dan Cockrell on, from he used to be VP at Disney, 26 years in his game. We've got folks talking about intercultural competency, privacy issues. There's all kinds of great leadership joy in there as well. And this gets back to my premise, which is great leaders know how to run great meetings, and you can't have a great meeting without a great leader. So that's the full theme of the entire thing, and that's how it comes together, and I think that's where the value is. The thing I would recommend also is they're pretty timeless episodes. So if you get a chance, go hit about episode 1. If you want to miss the introduction, episode 2, hit download and just sort of go through them, and it'll enrich, quite literally, your leadership.
Skip the Netflix binge and binge on Gord's podcast.
That'd be great. And you can get it by going to meetingleadershipinc.com /podcast. That's right on my website, or again on any major podcast app.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gord, for being here. Thank you to those of you who tuned in live, the comments, the thumbs up. Thank you to those of you who listened on the replay. If you have found this valuable, please share it. Please share it in your organization. Please share it with your peers, with your colleagues, because I think the more impact we can have around the world, as Gord said, we're going to change the world one meeting at a time. Have yourself an awesome day, ladies, and we will catch you in the near future.